see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy and Compassion. And today I'm very pleased to have Geshe Lobsang Negi here to join me. Thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you with me. And to give a little background for you, you're, as I understand it, the senior lecturer and director at the Emory-Tibet Partnership. And you also have developed a training called the Cognitive-Based Compassion Training. And so we wanted to kind of talk about that. But can you talk just introduce yourself a little bit more background about yourself? And
so my name is Lobsang Negi, as you mentioned, Geshe Lobsang Negi. Geshe is a title, really. But I come from a remote place in the Himalayas. And I was a monk for about 27 years in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and came to Emory in 1991. And so now I teach at Emory University in the Department of Religion, and also direct a program known as Emory-Tibet Partnership. It's a program to really facilitate cross-fertilization of the knowledge between the two traditions, Western and Tibetan traditions.
Oh, so you had lived in Tibet, did you say? You'd been a monk in Tibet?
In India.
In India. Oh, okay.
In the Himalayas, it's a small valley called Kinnaur in the Himalayas. It's a Tibetan culture and area, the area with the Tibetan culture and the Tibetan Buddhism. So I became a monk when I was 14 with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and studied there for about 20 years or so. So, and then came to America in 91.
Oh, I see. And I have a picture here of your Emory faculty page with together with the Dalai Lama. So I'm showing that on the screen right now. So you're now at Emory and you're working on a partnership with the university there in Tibetan studies and how long have you been there, did you say?
I came here in 1991 as a graduate student, actually, and since 2000 I've been teaching here full-time, and meanwhile developed various programs. For example, a program in research for compassion, and it's called the Cognitive-Based Compassion Training. But Emory-Tibet Partnership also offers various other programs like Emory Tibet Science Initiative. It's a program to teach modern science to Tibetan monks and nuns.
Yeah, I'm just showing it on the screen here. I have the capacity to show on the screen here, so I'm showing the picture of the Emory-Tibet Partnership. And then there's a section there on the cognitive-based compassion training. So if anyone wants to follow up, they can just go to those links and check it out in more depth. Well, these dialogues that I'm doing are about how do we build a culture of empathy and compassion, and that's exactly what you've been working on, I think, with your curriculum and your training. But before we kind of step into that, I'd like to find out a little bit about more about you, and one question I have is like, what's your most important value in your life personally? Like your most important value, and how did that value become important to you?
Well, I think that I can say compassion, or the love and compassion, really are the values that I consider most important in life, because right from the early childhood, it's the love and compassion is something that I learned from the people around me, like my mother, my father, and a spiritual teacher in the village that I grew up. And certainly that as I learned more of the Tibetan Buddhist philosophy and the practices, that have been incredibly fortunate to have the education in the monasteries under very, very kind teachers who embodied those qualities or the values. And so I see as I learned more about what really matters in the world, for social well-being, but also for individual well-being, compassion and empathy, the compassion. These values seem to be very, very important, the foundations for our happiness and flourishing.
Do you have a story or an anecdote of something that you learned along the way? Was there any kind of like high points for learning about empathy and compassion? Maybe when you were growing up, you mentioned, from your parents, from your community, from your, spiritual teachers there. Was there like an actual story, like a moment where, oh, this is a real insight that you learned?
Well, I think that as I mentioned, that in my childhood, when I was really young, maybe 6 years or so, I to remember my mother, who was very spiritual, and in our village, there was a tradition where the men and women, the grown up, they will go for a day-long practice on the full moon. In the morning, take what is known as the Mahayana Precept. It's the one-day precepts to, be mindful of their actions and the speech, and devote the kind of time in spiritual practices. But part of the practice there had to do with a teaching that the head lama there will offer to those who are attending the teachings, and that had to do with the Jataka tales. It's about for a moment, you disappeared. So
your video disappeared too. Perhaps.
Yeah, that's probably.
There you go. Yeah, it's coming back. Now we got you.
Yeah, so I guess I have to keep touching it from time to time.
Oh, maybe the screensaver or something.
Yes. So what happened is that they would hear these Jataka tales. It's stories about Buddha's previous lives, where he exhibits the various kinds of the practices, for example, generosity or this compassion and like that. And my mother used to come and then tell those stories to us, as children. And I remember that very clearly that hearing those stories like with the vivid imagery, and those, I think that were the times when I, in somewhat kind of maybe unconsciously, but kind of developed the appreciation for the kindness and generosity, love, compassion, these qualities.
Oh, nice. So it's really this hearing the stories, the storytelling, and kind of just feeling the stories, and you really took those stories to heart.
Yeah, and that's and there was another very kind of poignant moment for me, and that was when I was, I think, the fourth or fifth grade in the village school. We had to perform a play, and that had to do with one of the events in Siddhartha's life. Buddha was known as Siddhartha before he became Buddha, and in that play we had to enact, and I was playing a role there also, and it had to do with an event where Siddhartha, as a kind of the very young prince, and his cousin Devadatta, the two of them were kind of wandering outside. And Devadatta shot an arrow towards a goose, and then the goose comes kind of the falling down, and the Siddhartha finds him and then picks up the goose and then removes the arrow and try to comfort, and then there comes Devadatta running, then asks that goose be given to him because it belongs to him. He shot, and the Siddhartha says, "No, I protected him. The goose belongs to me." And so both of those are princes. So the argument had to be kind of settled in the court of and the play unfolds like this: that in the royal court. They have to be fair, so they decide by saying that, why don't you place the goose on the ground, and then the two of you stand on the, the two sides of the goose, and then let the goose choose you, and then the goose belongs to whoever he or she chooses, and then goose goes to Siddhartha, and that the idea then the kind of the lesson there is that, that people are oriented towards those who are kind to you, who give you life and protection. And that was a kind of this, again, at a very young age, something that really stuck with me.
Oh, wow. Were you one of the actors in that play, or were you just watching it?
No, I was part of the actor, but I wasn't Siddhartha or Devadatta.
But still, you were part of it. It's amazing, kind of imagination and reading and stories, how it really can bring people into seeing the value of empathy and compassion.
I think, yeah, I think that that's something that we learn, not necessarily by telling that you should do this and that, but sort of embodied form, like that when it becomes kind of a part of a cultural, the practice, and it's embodied. I think those have very kind of those situations make very deep kind of impression on you.
Yeah, it's that quality of really feeling it. It's like when you were talking about the goose getting shot with the arrow, I can feel the arrow piercing my heart.
That's right.
Kind of like that. So I have a visceral feel for it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, so then you've been working on empathy and compassion, and there's a lot of discussion about what the words even mean, definition-wise. And I find one way of kind of approaching it is through a metaphor. So, kind of metaphorically, if you had a metaphor for empathy or a metaphor for compassion, what would they be? Typically, empathy is even defined as a metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia because it opens the door to a wide variety of feelings and experiences. So it's like a richness. So I was wondering if you had some metaphors of how you would metaphorically define empathy and compassion.
I think that for me, compassion is like a very kind mother. If you think of a mother and she has children, whether it's one child or two or three like that, there's something about the mother that no matter how ugly the children may be, how naughty the children may be, whatever they are, in the mother's eye, those children are most precious for her. So the compassion is something that it allows us to relate to others with that sense of kind of holding them as precious beings, and gives this deep sense of endearment. And that's what I think that are the catalysts for empathy, the kind of the robust empathy and compassion, because mother, with that sense of deep endearment and affection for the children, she can feel for their pain, their happiness, very viscerally, very kind of in an embodied form. And that's what I think that empathy has to do with, kind of to be able to feel for the other person's feelings, whether they're joy, sorrow, and so forth. And compassion, therefore, is that heartfelt kind of wish, the desire to see others relieved of their suffering, like the mother seeing her child in pain, would want from the depth of her heart for the child to be relieved of that pain. So that's the compassion. And, in other words, empathy allows her to feel for her child's pain, in a way you cannot bear to see the child in pain. And that's what that kind of elicits compassion, that is to want the child to be relieved of suffering and to do whatever in her capacity to help the child find that relief.
So the metaphor for empathy and compassion is the mother's love and care for the child. Empathy and compassion is like a mother's care for the child, and really accepting of all of its qualities, and then and then the compassion part is, if the child is suffering, to want to alleviate that suffering.
Exactly, the mother, kind of embraces her children, even when they are not behaving that well. If she has 3 children, that a mother, usually care for 3 children, that without really discriminating. It's like the 5 fingers of our own hand that we cannot really say that this finger is more important and I don't care for this. This is bad. We value all 5 equally. And then like that, mother's love allows her to hold these 3 children or 5 children that she has equally precious. And I think that it's not connected with the judgment, like that, immediately punishing and like that. That is even when the mother wants to discipline her children, it's out of concern. What she wants is to really children to grow well, so that they are more successful. They have better kind of quality of life in the future. So even making corrections to their behaviors and so forth, underlying motivation there is the compassion and love for the children. So I think that's that when we have genuine compassion for others, there is that kind of quality of acceptance and not judging. There's kind of the tolerance, patience, forgiveness, and as the compassion itself, it's ready to do anything to help others to find that relief from any form of distress or the suffering that they are experiencing.
So that's kind of on a one-to-one basis, right? The mother for a child or some children, and you kind of were talking about treating them all equally or having the same care, just like you would for your hand. And it's kind of extending. I'm kind of seeing that to extend to all of humanity. And that's really what I'm interested in, is how do we build a worldwide culture where empathy and compassion are foundational values. And so I'm kind of wondering, what do you see? What would that look like? What would a culture of empathy and compassion look like?
That's right. I mean, exactly that. As you said, that our task really is to kind of expand our compassion from a few people who are close to us to larger kind of segment of the society, and that's really the challenge. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he points to 2 levels of compassion. What is called the biologically based compassion and the deliberately cultivated compassion. Biological based compassion is like the mother's love for her children. It's something that it is in our gene, in our DNA as mammals, that is something that instilled in our very kind of the basic fabric of our genes. So therefore that we have the capacity to have that kind of sense of closeness, affection towards some, that our own parents or a very close friend and like that. But the thing is that how can we expand that to extend that to others, like the strangers, those who are somewhat distant to us, even those whom we may be somewhat struggling with, that people who those people who annoy us, or that the people who don't really we don't really kind of get along in some sense. And that happens, in today's world. It's quite pervasive in our society. So how can we do that? And that's where that I think that one of the beauties here is that there is this tradition called Lojong, tradition in Tibetan Buddhism or Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. Really, it's something that you find it kind of really well articulated in the way back in the 7th century Buddhist master like Shantideva, and then further that as the Buddhism went to Tibet for many centuries, kind of further refined and practiced, and in such a way of finding that what kind of strategies would allow us to expand that compassion. And that's where that I think that that if we can, there are two things basically for this unbiased compassion, the compassion that is broader. One thing is to somehow convince ourselves, kind of become aware, recognize, and deeply develop that conviction that that we are all, as human beings, same, wanting to be happy and to be free from suffering. And some kind of the shared humanity is something that we need to, recognize on the basis of that fundamental aspiration for happiness and to avoid suffering. And that is not a kind of fiction. I mean, this is each and every individual wants to survive and to, whether we use the psychology language, to be happy or flourish, that want to survive. I mean, that's kind of the basic instinct or the desire we all have, and to avoid anything that undermines our survival, and therefore anything that is problematic, suffering that we want to avoid. And I think that since we ourselves have that deep aspiration, and because of that, we make effort, we pursue happiness and success and well-being, and to avoid suffering, make efforts to avoid suffering, and so forth. That aspiration is there for others also. On that basis alone, if we can respect their right to be happy, or pursue happiness, and to be free, I think this is something that if we can, bring that conviction deeply into our hearts, it will allow us to not see the world in a kind of the very solid categories of those who should be happy, those who should not have happy, and those who we don't care, but rather see all of us in the same boat and with the same sets of hopes and aspirations, and therefore right to pursue happiness. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that on top of that, for the compassion and kind of the immediate, robust empathy and the compassion to unfold, I think what we need is to develop that mother's kind of endearment for others. That is what we need. And one of the ways that we can feel that sense of affection, closeness, is if we can, again, educate ourselves, in recognizing that we are interdependent, how our own happiness, how our own comforts, how everything that we appreciate, enjoy, actually comes from others. That it's about kind of connecting what we enjoy with the kindness of others, whether it is intended kindness or unintentionally, to recognize that we benefit from others. We are interdependent and interconnected. And that the part is, if we can become more aware of that and deeply kind of convinced of that reality, it also then will help us have that sense of closeness, sense of affection towards others. And that is the kind of the key to empathy and compassion is that sense of closeness. And if we can develop that empathy, we will be more able to have that empathy and compassion.
So there was two parts to that as I'm seeing it. Is one is it's kind of like seeing the common humanity of everyone. That my feelings, my sufferings are really the same as your feelings and your sufferings and your joys. And so really starting to see that there is this basic shared humanity that we have experientially. And then the second part seemed to be more see how we develop a sense of care, and the care comes out of seeing how we're interdependent, how we kind of how my actions affect your actions affect my actions, and affect others' actions. So it's kind of seeing that interdependence.
Yes, the first part, exactly that, as you said. The second part, seeing how we are interdependent in that way, but more specifically, developing the awareness and that how we are benefited by so many others. Mm-hmm. Every bite of food we eat, if we can, have this recognition that it comes from so many other beings. Every piece of clothing that we are wearing, it has gone through many people, the effort. And that kind of deliberate acknowledgement of others' role in our own happiness and accomplishments is what allows us to have a deeper sense of gratitude, a deeper sense of appreciation, which psychologically kind of brings us close to them. That's the sense of endearment or affection, and that sense of endearment and affection is like the mother feels for her child. Mm-hmm. That to some degree, if we have that sense of endearment or affection towards our co-workers, neighbors, that the people that we see on the streets, the walking and like that naturally, then that kind of sense of endearment will make it easier for us to feel for them, that with their sorrows and joys and so forth, that we will feel for them, and won't be able to kind of just, bear, to see them just kind of having difficult time, but rather feel that a wish for them to be kind of free from how nice if they don't have to suffer this way, to struggle this way, and a wish for them to kind of not be struggling. That what can I do to help them? So that's in the Lojong kind of the literature, you find this process in the metaphor used here is like a very kind of rich harvest. That if you were to cultivate a rich harvest, first what you need to do is kind of level the field. But if the field is uneven with the rocks somewhere and then bushes otherwise, and then a few kind of the patches that are even, what the seeds that you plant, therefore the beautiful flowers or the crops and like that, it will grow unevenly. That where there are rocks, they would not grow, and that and then where there is plant, it will grow nicely. So the first is what we call the equanimity or the impartiality. That is about creating that, making that ground even in terms of other people that we interact with, to be able to relate to them impartially. And that impartiality is about recognizing that each one of the three, whether it's a close friend or stranger or someone who we are struggling with, if we can go beyond this superficial relationship to the fundamental kind of aspiration of these three people, and connect at that level, that where we have this shared aspiration, common aspiration to be happy and to be free of suffering, and acknowledging that, to then accepting that each one has the same right as I do to pursue happiness. And that is kind of the evening the field. Then what is needed is that for those seeds then to not only to grow evenly, but then to really flourish and yield this kind of abundant harvest, is we need the moisture, the water to nurture those. And that's what this affection or endearment is, that this feeling of kind of the affection towards others, and how that can be cultivated in a deliberate way is that the more mindful or aware we are of others' kindness towards us, that will help us feel more close to them. And the reality is such that we benefit from others, from vast number of people. If you just take an example like in Atlanta, I live in Atlanta. It's not too far-fetched to think that so many people who are in Atlanta working, whatever they're working in the restaurants, at the supermarkets, in the construction, the sewer, kind of this, the people clearing the sewer system or the electricity and so forth and so on. Everyone is working, and their efforts all touch me. That my each day of comfort and joy and well-being, it's some direct or indirect ways touched by their lives and their work, and that's the kind of the recognition. If we truly be aware and deeply kind of to be aware of that, it will help us to feel that gratitude towards them, that sense of appreciation. And that appreciation changes our psychological kind of connection to them, instead of seeing them, someone irrelevant to someone, who is important. That psychologically speaking, it presents others as more precious. And that's where it's like that. Like for the mother, her child is so precious. That similarly, to some degree, if we can transform our relationship to others, from one of kind of dislike or indifference to, others are precious, in our feeling kind of thing. If that feeling emerges, then obviously we will be, more concerned about their well-being and so forth.
So it's really nurturing that sense of preciousness towards other, and it starts with, as a child, we're really dependent on our parents to nurture us. So we're really seeing that, hey, we couldn't get along without them having nurtured us, and the teachers having nurtured us in school, and on and on. So really that sense, that awareness that we were kind of like dependent on them, and that they contributed to our well-being, that then we start getting a sense of preciousness. Oh, this is so important to my well-being. And that creates that kind of a sense of caring and concern for them and others as well.
Exactly. I mean, you said it, perfectly. That but when we learn, that this sense of cultivating gratitude for others, obviously, we should work from those people from whom we receive the most crucial caring, like our own parents, when we were totally helpless. That as we were born, that if we were left unattended, we would be dead in a matter of days, or maybe within a day. It's their kindness, their caring. That's what to really help us survive, and then every step of our life, even when we are most productive, earning our own living and so forth, if we can really look at more closely, without others, well, how could we survive? So everything we use, everything we have in our life to, whether it's to feed us, to protect us, and everything, it involves others. That's so that recognition is, I think, that the key to appreciation of others, and that appreciation is what engenders the sense of affection. And that affection, when you feel affection for someone, you can't ignore their pain and suffering. You will feel for that, and that's what leads to the compassion. Want to do something to relieve their suffering.
Well, you had taken this awareness and put it into a training, a whole curriculum, and it was called cognitive-based compassion training. And there was just a study done on it, and I think I'm not quite sure, I'm going to be interviewing some of the people that did the study about, they had participants doing taking part in the training, and then they did tests on them to read how well that they were able to read other people's, empathize with others through using the mind's eye test, where you see someone's eyes, and then you can kind of read what the emotion is that's kind of coming, and the clearer your, the better you can read that, kind of the more empathic you are. So perhaps we can go through the training as much as you'd like. Like, how are you structuring the training? What does the course look like, and so forth?
Sure. The protocol, this for cognitive-based compassion training is something that we developed back in 2004, and actually that for about 5 semesters we did our initial study with freshman college students at Emory, and that was to see how they may differ in responding to stressors. And so the college students, actually, we saw that those who went through the program and did meditation, what we call the high practice group, actually their way to kind of respond to the stressors was different than those who were in control or the low practice group. And what it indicates is that the change in your attitudes towards others, it actually helps you how you react or respond to the situation around, and you could react with as if they are dangers to our survival, or less dangerous, or more friendly, and so forth. So the compassion meditation is. My assumption is that it kind of helps you see the world less nasty, people around you, the more as like no different than me, so it kind of reduces that this kind of this threat, if you will, from others, like the
kind of the fear and threat of others, seeing others as a threat and something to be feared, kind of reduces that.
Yes. So therefore, that you are not reacting, with the stress, So you can see that changes at our kind of stress hormones levels, like the cortisol or the something called in the immune system, interleukin 6, IL-6 is in inflammatory, cells in the immune that correlate, that are kind of related to the stress thing. So we saw that, but then the study that you are referring to is, in this study that Jennifer, actually, that one of our colleagues here at Emory, precisely she tried to see if there is a difference between those people who were in control versus who practice compassion, and to see that if their empathy accuracy, any difference in terms of kind of the empathy accuracy, and that you can, as you mentioned, that by apparently there are now quite reliable way to testing that through what's called the reading the mind through eyes, that it's through the eyes to seeing that whether they're happy, sad, and so forth and so on. But also it's not just kind of reading through the eyes, but there are certain brain circuits that are kind of quite well known as the brain circuits associated with empathy to see if there is a heightened activity there or not. So that obviously you will talk to the scientists themselves to kind of get more precise kind of outcome. With the practice itself, what it does is that first it teaches us to how to develop a basic stability of the mind. That it's so easy for us to react in unwise kind of the sort of preconditioned ways to different triggers in our daily life, with kind of as perceiving that as threats, as stressful, and so forth. So first thing is really...
If I could just jump in, it would be like if you're driving and somebody cuts you off, you get all mad and angry at them, just as kind of a... And there's so many of those kind of things that happen. Somebody ignores you, isn't kind, and you get mad, and you're...
Yes, mad, fearful. I mean, name it. I mean, all the it happens within the relationship, in the family, in workplace, and so forth. So, if we are unable to notice such impulses, we're not going to be able to work with them, to kind of transform them, work with them. So, the very first step is to really develop what we call the attentional stability. And it's with the basic practice of mindfulness of the breathing. But then we expand that to then the training in becoming more aware of our own kind of the habitual patterns, the emotional and the reaction patterns, but just through a practice known as resting the mind in the present moment or in its natural uncontrived state. So simply, instead of kind of immediately judging our thoughts, feelings, memories, hopes, fears as bad, good, and so forth, the idea is to kind of bring attention in the present moment simply to witness the reality of our inner world, that in the forms of hopes, worries, fears, emotions, and so forth. In whatever way they unfold, to notice without judgment. So that in such a process they kind of subside, but it also gives us many insights about our own certain patterns, certain habit patterns and so forth, so that we can work with them. If we are aware, that it's, instead of just unconsciously kind of suppressing them or acting on them.
Are you using meditation for that process? Is that so you're using meditation, and the meditation is about kind of quieting yourself and just watching kind of the feelings that are coming up, and you're wanting to not judge the feelings, not say good, bad, but just watch them come up and have a sense of presence as they come up, and that kind of creates a more spaciousness.
Exactly.
Then, so that it's like you're creating more and more space, so you have less and less of those triggers, those things that set you off and get you angry. And
yes, but also that you also there are certain insights that unfold also. That there's the thoughts that come of something I might not get good grade for a student, for example. It's not the same as not getting good grade. It's just a thought. If someone is very vulnerable to anxiety, such a thought itself will lead to kind of the full-blown anxiety if you don't recognize it, and then just notice it. It's a thought, and then leave it to their kind of just simply observe without mindlessly getting involved. So it kind of gives you insights about your own inner thoughts, feelings, and so forth, but also ways insights about that, how the thoughts are not reality, the actual objects themselves. But also, in such a process, what you also come to a recognition is that, so much of our thoughts and feelings and so forth, underlying motivation is for happiness and to freedom. And the basic aspiration that we have is to be happy and to be free. We recognize that. But when those thoughts and so forth, whether it's unhealthy kind of emotions and so forth, when you don't act on them but simply notice, there is a way that they also subside. So there is that greater sense of serenity, spaciousness. That unfolds. It's very helpful, certainly, and that's what kind of gives us a certain kind of the foundation, then to more actively then look at that certain kind of afflictive, strong, obsessive desires or anger or the kind of hatred or the jealousy and that's more of a kind of the self-centeredness and so forth, that how these are kind of destructive. That's how when we keep reinforcing them, that how they lead to the problems, the very problems that we don't want. And but combined with this exercise or the meditation, if you will, to not then judge that these are good, bad, in that absolute sense, but rather kind of the bringing awareness into those passions or the emotions and so forth, that as they subside, you get a sense that those emotions, the kind of the disturbing emotions and so forth, actually are something that are not very helpful. But you can transform them. That you are not kind of victim to it. You are not slave to it. It's something that you can choose to observe, not act on that. At the subside, it can be a very kind of the liberating kind of sense. I think bringing a certain sense of security, if you will, confidence. And particularly if you think of the people who may have difficulties with the self-image, that the self-esteem, judging of oneself as bad and so forth, the kind of this idea that however destructive these emotions, that it may be, that actually they are something we have control over. We can have control over. That they don't just simply control us. That there is a separation in a way. I mean, that if you think of that it's something that is other than who I really am. That there's a certain degree of freedom that unfolds, confidence, and with that, then then there is a sense that yes, it is emotions are kind of that excessive desires, excessive anger, and so forth are quite destructive. So therefore, it's something that I can work with, to transform it. That's and then that the resolve, that inner confidence, can be enhanced through such reflections and meditations. Once that happens, then it's then to move to the others, that like us, other beings, that whether they are our friends, strangers, or adversaries, that they too have the same sets of aspirations like us and so forth. And if we learn to then reflect on that kind of the shared aspiration that we have, and then the more we kind of embrace that reality, that deeply in our convictions, it will change that how we feel about others, how we interact with others, and that's the kind of the equanimity. And then the further, beyond that, then that step is really to cultivate a sense of appreciation and gratitude, in order to give rise to that sense of endearment, in order to transform others like our own children, that is or mothers, that is with more deliberate, careful reflection on our happiness is connected with kindness of others, intended or unintended, others' efforts. And it's, so that the more we can internalize kind of that awareness, we will have a different kind of sets of feelings towards others instead of indifference to someone who is close. And that's really the key. Key to compassion and empathy is affection for others. And so in this kind of protocol, we lead the students to first week, just attention stability. Second week, resting the mind in the present moment to become more aware of our own inner thoughts, feelings, and so forth, so that we can kind of relate to them in a more secure way instead of just kind of blind ways. Third week is something called self-compassion. That is to bring personal insight into that these afflictive kind of the states that are they really are something that we have control over. We can have control over. They don't, have control over us. That is, and therefore, since they can be tackled, and then to eventually letting that resolve unfold, that we must tackle them, to transform them, and that's and then from there, fourth week we move into the impartiality, that towards others, and then to the gratitude and appreciation. This fifth week, and then to another week to further kind of deepen that sense of appreciation, by specifically reflecting on the shortcomings of the self-centered, more kind of self-oriented concerns, and the benefits of the altruistic kind of concerns, that looking at that how the more self-centered we are, that actually that it turns into kind of more problems, in personal life, in society, and like that. So these kind of the reflections, on the one hand, help us have greater appreciation for love and compassion and caring for others, but also combined with the actual recognition that how others are actually so crucial for our own survival. They're not just in others in an abstract sense, but those who we work together, those who we get along and not get along, that all of them, in one way or another, are intertwined with our own interest, our own kind of well-being and so forth. Embracing that kind of reality is what, that we emphasize. And then from there, then the specifically that kind of about empathy and compassion part, that is where that you specifically try to have a more of an awareness about how the others, despite their wish to be happy and to be free of suffering, how they are, they may not be able to kind of have that genuine flourishing and happiness, and despite their wish to be free from suffering, how they may have the various forms of difficulties, that you can reflect upon the situations like in the certain countries, certain communities that were lack of food and so forth and so on, or to other people tormented by other human-made tragedies or the natural tragedies and so forth and so on. So that like the mother kind of becoming aware of the child's suffering, that you kind of actively develop greater awareness of the kind of the difficulties that others go through, so that there then idea is that reflection grounded in all those steps of endearment and impartiality and so forth will help you to have more of a feeling for their pain and so forth, and lead to compassion. So you can actually deliberately in the beginning try to cultivate this, that how nice it would be if they are free from their suffering and have happiness. May they be free from their suffering and have happiness, really as kind of deeply as you can feel. And then may I be able to help them, find their happiness and this freedom from suffering. And when some degree of feeling comes, then you can sit with that, can try to infuse, the whole heart and mind with that kind of feeling. And so that's what the compassion training protocol kind of looks like.
How many weeks was that? I heard up to 6, I think.
It can be met for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or 10 weeks or more. Just basically that these steps some of the steps you can have them practice for 2 weeks. It's because some are a little bit more complex. That you can depending on how you design it. But the basic basic, all that, if you give 1 week each, it would be covered in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Is there like a follow-up as well, or is it you just do the course and then is it you kind of learn the skills and you kind of do it on your own, or how does that, what's kind of the follow-up?
Well, actually, in the context of the research, obviously, it's people involved in the research, they come for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever the kind of the study design allows. And then after it is done, actually at Emory, there are a number of kind of the places where they can continue their practice, that afterwards. And the ideal way to do, I mean, if one were to actually practice this, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, it's enough to kind of create that spark. Mm-hmm. Really, you need to get kind of grow that much, more, and that requires continuous practice.
Yeah, then you need to go and have some kind of a practice group, maybe like an ongoing weekly practice group to kind of, you just kind of gotten the spark going and you have to kind of keep fanning it and putting a little tinder and yes, kind of keep it going to keep that empathy and compassion growing.
Yes, exactly. And then I think that, that as you keep doing that and as you notice the change in your interactions with others, how your feelings and so forth, those moments are very powerful. That they reinforce kind of your kind of conviction in the benefits of these practices and so forth. So it's about doing it formally on a regular basis and being mindful in the everyday life, how it is affecting you or your interaction with others.
We're really short on time here. I think we're going a minute or two over, so sorry about that. But the approach that I've been really interested in for fostering empathy is reflective listening, kind of the Carl Rogers thread of his work. And we have something called empathy groups, where we have small groups and do reflective listening. I'm just wondering what your, how that kind of compares with the approach that you're using.
I think that empathic listening, I mean, it's certainly one of the steps. That again, if you create a space, where we are all trying to kind of relate to one another, that when people share their hopes and aspirations and fears and difficulties and success and so forth, when with that open mind, as we are listening to others, it helps you in many ways to kind of relate to others, because we ourselves have all those kind of ups and downs in life, the success and failures and so forth and so on. So therefore, it kind of listening to others, kind of openness in such a way that that said, yes, I can relate to that. It has the same impact that you create this. You understand another person as that another person now simply being somebody that you don't know. There is that kind of bond, if you will, that is established because of that shared experience that of other people in the group and ourselves, and I mean that's I think that it's a very that's the kind of the one of the foundations for empathy. I mean, that you can do it with the actually creating that atmosphere of sharing and so forth, but also that idea about this the impartiality, that whereas recognizing that again, with our understanding, to really to convince ourselves of how other people and myself, we all have the same, we are all the same, with same sets of aspirations to be happy and to be free from suffering. If we can connect with that, the identifying with others, we identify with others. As one of the biologists here at Emory, Frans de Waal, who has written extensively on empathy, he talks about that. The strongest portal to empathy is identification. When we identify with someone. So in those kind of group sharing, we identify with each other, or we can also identify with each other also by actively, deliberately cultivating, educating ourselves that we are no different from each other on that basic, basic level.
So it sounds like you're saying there's different routes to come to that consciousness, that awareness, or that kind of way of being of.
Yes. There are various ways to find, there are various approaches, various ways to arrive at that recognition of feeling that, we are no different, or have that kind of identification with others.
Well, great. Well, this has been really wonderful chatting with you. I mean, I could go on for hours because this is my favorite topic in the world. So, but I don't want to keep you over the time. Maybe we can continue some other time or do some panels. I've interviewed Frans de Waal as well, and and I know he's there at Emory too. And I just love the work he does with animals and empathy and so forth. So I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation that we can kind of keep it going and online like this, perhaps.
Certainly, it will be a pleasure to continue our conversation.
Okay, well then I will say goodbye and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and until we meet again.
Thank you. You have the same. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.